The prairie stretched endless, gold and harsh beneath the burning Sunday. Evelyn Harper, a cowgirl hardened by years of solitude, rode her bay mare along the dry creek bed. Life had not been kind. She had buried her parents young, run the ranch alone until debt stripped it away, and now she drifted, taking work where she could. She carried herself with quiet grit, but loneliness clung like dust on her boots. Ahead, her horse's ears flicked nervously. Evelyn followed their gaze and saw a circle of vultures hanging in the sky, black specks against the blue. Something was dead ahead. As she rode closer, the smell of blood hit her nose, sour and heavy. Around a bend she saw the truth. A mare lay lifeless in the dirt, hide torn by coyotes, flies already buzzing thick around the wounds. Evelyn grimaced but kept her eyes moving. Then she spotted it beside the body, something small and trembling, struggling to rise. A newborn foal, no more than a day old, its legs wobbly, its ribs jutting through skin stretched thin. It gave a pitiful bleat and collapsed again. Evelyn's heart clenched. Out here, without its mother, it would never see another dawn. She dismounted quickly, boots crunching on dry earth, and knelt beside the foal. Its wide eyes shone with fear, but there was no fight left. It only whimpered, chest heaving too fast, every breath a battle. Evelyn reached out, brushing dust from its muzzle. "Easy, little one," she murmured, her voice breaking. The foal twitched, but did not pull away. She knew this land too well. Thirst, predators, heat death came swiftly to the weak. But something inside her stirred, stronger than logic. She had lost too much already. She could not walk away from this fragile life. Not today, she vowed. With slow care, she pulled her saddle blanket free, wrapping the foal's trembling body. It was light, too light for what it should be. Grunting with effort, she lifted it across her mare's back, steadying it with one arm as she mounted. The foal whimpered, pressed tight into her side, but did not resist. Evelyn whispered encouragement as the mare started forward, hooves kicking dust. "Hold on, fighter. I've buried enough dreams in this dirt. I won't bury you." The horizon shimmered cruelly with heat, but she kept her eyes ahead. Each faint exhale against her arm fueled her determination. By the time she reached her small shack, the prairie was drenched in gold light, shadows stretching long. Evelyn carried the foal into her barn and laid it on fresh straw. The lantern's glow revealed every bone, every rib, every shallow breath. The sight nearly undid her. She rummaged through her supplies, finding an old bottle she'd once used for calves. Filling it with warm milk, she knelt. At first the foal refused, too weak, but instinct drove it to latch. It sucked greedily, milk spilling down its chin. Evelyn let out a shaky laugh, tears streaking her dust-stained face. The nights that followed were long battles of will. Evelyn woke every 2 hours, feeding the foal, rubbing its sides to keep warmth in its frail body. Coyotes yipped outside, circling close, but inside the barn she created a sanctuary of light and patience. She named him Spirit, for though his body was fragile, his will to live was fierce. Sometimes, when exhaustion dragged her down, Evelyn laid her head against his tiny frame and whispered, "Don't leave me too." She had carried grief for years, but now she clung to hope, desperate and fragile as the foal itself. Spirit grew in fits and starts. Some mornings he seemed stronger, standing a little longer, stumbling a little less. Other days he barely managed to rise, his legs folding beneath him. Evelyn never gave up. She sang to him while brushing his coat, old cowboy ballads her father once hummed by the fire. Her voice cracked with sorrow, but Spirit seemed soothed, his small head leaning into her touch. Neighbors who stopped by scoffed at her efforts. "He's a lost cause," one rancher said. Evelyn only straightened. "So was I once. Look at me now." Spirit pressed close, her shadow in miniature. She built him a pen from scrap boards and wire, her hands blistering from the work. At night, when coyotes howled, she slept on straw beside him, rifle within reach. Spirit often curled against her, his shallow breaths finally steady. She brushed his coat every day, humming softly, though tears often slid down her cheeks. He gave her something to wake for, something to fight for. Watching him stumble, fall, and rise again reminded her that she too had survived every fall. Spirit wasn't just living, he was teaching her to live again. By midsummer, his coat began to gleam faintly, though he remained smaller than other foals. Evelyn worried, but hid it. She trained him gently, introducing halter and rope with patience. He startled easily, eyes wide with fear, but calm the moment her hand brushed his neck. "I've got you," she whispered again and again, words that became her vow. Night still brought tears, but they were mixed now grief for what she had lost, gratitude for what she had found. Spirit wasn't just an orphaned foal anymore. He was her second chance. One sweltering afternoon, Silas McCrae, a wealthy land baron, rode up with 2 men. His eyes lingered on Spirit with greedy interest. "Heard you're raising an orphan," he drawled. $50, and he's mine." Evelyn stiffened. $50 was a fortune, enough to feed her for months, but she shook her head. "Not for sale," Silas smirked. "That scrawny thing won't last the winter. Best you let me take him." Evelyn's hand hovered near her revolver. "He'll last longer than you will," she said coldly. Silas spat in the dust and rode off, but his threat clung like a shadow. Winter came hard and early. Snow piled high against the shack. Winds howled like demons across the prairie. Evelyn bundled Spirit in blankets, fed him warm mash, and pressed close to him on the coldest nights. Some evenings she feared he wouldn't last. His body shook violently, breath shallow, eyes dull with exhaustion. She whispered into his ear, "You're stronger than this. So am I." Against every odd, he survived. When spring finally returned, Spirit stepped into sunlight taller, steadier, with a spark in his eyes. Evelyn dropped to her knees, laughing and crying. "You made it, boy. We both did." By his second year, Spirit trotted with pride, his copper coat catching the Sunday Evelyn leaned on the fence, pride swelling as neighbors who once mocked now watched in awe. Children begged to pet him, giggling when Spirit nudged their hands for treats. Evelyn smiled quietly, though her eyes still scanned the horizon. Silas had not returned, but greed never disappeared. Spirit was more than a foal, now he was a prize worth stealing. Evelyn knew she'd fight to her last breath before she let anyone take him. One evening, Spirit nudged her shoulder insistently and pulled her toward the pasture. Coyotes had dug under the fence, threatening her calves. Evelyn reinforced the posts, gratitude welling. "Good boy," she murmured, stroking his mane. The colt she once carried across the prairie was becoming her protector. By his third year, Spirit accepted saddle and rider. Evelyn never forced him. She waited until trust was complete. When she finally mounted, he stood tall, steady. Riding him across the prairie felt like flying wind tore through her hair. Hooves thundered beneath and laughter spilled from her lips, a sound she hadn't made in years. Spirit had given her back joy. But danger was never far. One summer evening, smoke rose on the horizon, wildfire tearing across the plains, driven by wind. Evelyn's heart pounded. She saddled Spirit, determination set in her jaw. "We've got work to do." Together they drove her herd to safety, Spirit fearless among smoke and flames. Sparks burned her clothes, heat seared her skin, but they pressed forward. When the fire passed, her cattle lived, neighbors were safe, and Spirit stood blackened with soot but unbroken. Neighbors swore no horse could have done it. Evelyn knew it was destiny. Exhausted, she collapsed in the dirt. Spirit stood over her, guarding, his eyes fierce. Old Jensen muttered, "That horse ain't just any horse. He's a gift. Evelyn pressed her forehead to his neck, tears streaking her ash-stained cheeks. No, she whispered. He's family. From that day, Spirit was no longer just her horse. He became a symbol of survival. In town, children pointed. Old men tipped their hats. Women smiled as he trotted past. Evelyn stayed humble, but she knew Spirit had become a living legend. By his 4th year, Spirit was a stallion unmatched in strength. Evelyn rode him through storms, rivers, and roundups. He never faltered. Each scar mirrored one of hers. Each triumph belonged to both. They were no longer just cowgirl and horse. They were bound by something deeper than fate. But Evelyn never forgot the beginning. The foal trembling beside its dead mother. The vow she had whispered with tears in her eyes. I won't lose you. She had kept that promise, and Spirit, without words, had made his own, to never leave her side. At sunset, Evelyn often sat on her porch, Spirit grazing nearby, the prairie glowing red and gold. She thought of all she had lost, and all she had gained. Not emptiness, but abundance. Not grief, but family. The lonely cowgirl and her stallion, 2 souls once broken, now whole. Their story written forever across the wild western sky. Dawn rose thin and pale over the prairie, the kind of light that makes truths harder to ignore. Evelyn Harper woke stiff on the bunkhouse cot, listening to the hush after another sleepless night. Spirit grazed near the corral, his hooves whispering across frost, silvering the grass. Coffee hissed on the stove. She cupped the tin mug and steadied her breath. Yesterday's talk in town still scraped. McCrae's men had been seen along Dry Needle Ridge. Trouble could arrive like weather. Evelyn checked the rifles, oiled leather, folded maps. She wasn't running anymore. She intended to hold ground. Today, absolutely. By mid-morning, riders appeared on the far ridge, dark seed shaken from a mean hand. Evelyn watched through field glasses and recognized the posture before the faces. Careless, hungry, entitled. Spirit lifted his head, ears pricked, and answered with a thunderous snort. She saddled quickly, cinched tight, then walked him rather than mounting, letting his nerves ease. The riders didn't descend, only measured distances and left. The silence afterward felt taller. Evelyn traced their line of travel on her map, marking springs, gullies, and choke points. If they tested fences tonight, she'd be waiting with patience sharpened into purpose again. Neighbors drifted by, with excuses and news. Jensen brought nails in a flour sack and a warning shaped like a shrug. Mary Wilkes left fresh bread and told of a stranger boasting at the saloon that McCrae aimed to buy what he couldn't bully. Evelyn thanked them both, keeping her voice even. Fear spreads fast when you feed it. She preferred lean rations. Spirit mouthed Mary's sleeve and earned a laugh that lifted the yard. When they left, Evelyn walked the fence line, testing posts, tightening wire. She whispered to the land the simplest promise she knew: stay with me. That evening, wind bowed the cottonwood and scraped old talk from the eaves. Evelyn set 3 lanterns around the yard and left one guttering near the gate, a decoy for hurried eyes. Spirit dozed, hip cocked, pretending not to notice her restless pacing. She brewed coffee thick as resolve and counted cartridges by touch. The night settled heavy. Around midnight, a rider tested the gate with a gloved hand. The lantern tempted him close. Then wire whispered, and a curse split the dark. He galloped off. Evelyn didn't chase. She listened to distance close behind him, learning from his mistakes. At dawn, the world smelled rinsed, as if regret had washed overnight. Evelyn rode the boundary with a hammer, a spool of wire, and patience. Spirit followed untacked, shadowing her stirrup, nosing each post like a foreman. She found the cut strands near the arroyo and repaired them slow, knot by honest knot. Halfway through, she heard hooves behind and turned. Sheriff Harlan raised a hand, face carved by years of compromises. "McCrae's men complain you're setting traps." Evelyn sipped silence, then said, "Only for wolves." The sheriff sighed. "Neither enemy nor friend. Be careful what finds you out here." Afternoon brought heat that made even lies wilt. Evelyn moved slow, saving strength, then set a kettle on and mended the saddle she'd been ignoring. Spirit nudged her shoulder until she laughed, a short sound that felt borrowed and returned. A dust plume smudged the far ridge. 2 riders halted to watch. She didn't give them the show. Instead, she walked Spirit through side passes and quiet yields, teaching softness sharper than spurs. When the plume faded, she cooled him carefully and whispered thanks. Courage grows where it is watered. Time, touch, breath. She resolved to keep pouring into tomorrow's work. That night, campfire tongues licked the dark, while coyotes argued cases across the flats. Evelyn wrote 3 names on a scrap: Mother, Father, Spirit, and tucked it in her pocket like a creed. She wasn't religious, but devotion has many shapes. A breeze carried distant laughter from town. It sounded thin, already forgetting hard winters. Evelyn banked the fire, checked the latch twice, then stretched beneath a worn quilt smelling faintly of smoke and wild mint. Sleep came cautious, then generous. Before dreams, she heard Spirit shift and sigh. The little sound placed a stone where an emptiness had been at last. Morning peeled open, bright and unforgiving. Evelyn rode south to trade for salt, flour, and news. At the mercantile, whispers craned like sunflowers. A drifter claimed McCrae had hired a Pinkerton man, a reader of tracks and weaknesses. Evelyn bought coffee, nails, lamp oil, and kept her jaw steady. Jensen slipped her a packet of seeds. Sweet corn, beans, squash, and winked. Plant something stubborn. Outside, a boy asked if Spirit could smell storms. Better than some sheriffs, she said, then regretted the joke. On the ride home, clouds stacked blue mountains. She decided to plant the seeds anyway after the rains. In the afternoon heat, Evelyn strung bells on a low wire across the back trail, a song only trespassers would teach themselves to play. She set a mirror in the cottonwood to flash warnings at noon and dusk, then tucked extra cartridges inside flour sacks. Spirit watched, head tilted, as though memorizing her peculiar choreography. "Preparation is kindness to the future," she told him, half smile, half sermon. When shadows lengthened, she schooled him at the trot, circles becoming spirals, softness becoming trust. Afterward, she cooled him slow and thanked the day for not demanding anything worse from them yet. Near midnight, the bells whispered once, twice, then fell silent. Evelyn eased to the porch with her rifle and waited. A shadow, separated from the cottonwood, paused and took one step too many. She spoke like weather. "You're trespassing," a man's laugh answered, tight with liquor and arrogance. Another shadow shifted behind him. Evelyn fired a warning into dust at their boots. "Next one bites." Silence bent. The men retreated, muttering promises shaped like knives. When they were gone, Evelyn breathed again, slower, then sat on the step until the stars looked less like nails and more like choir tonight. Morning found her stacking stones into a low wall along the corral, something to catch bullets, and courage equally. Spirit nosed each rock as if blessing the work. She planted Jensen's seeds in a patch turned by hand, pressing them into soil with a tenderness she rarely risked. "Grow stubborn," she whispered. A hawk circled, then skimmed away toward the river bend. Evelyn checked her map again, tracing routes that offered cover and consequence. If McCrae's men pushed, she would funnel them where the ground favored her. She didn't romanticize defense. She simply refused surrender, dressed as prudence, out here. Word came by freight wagon, a church social planned for Saturday. Music and stew to thank neighbors who'd fought last summer's fires. Evelyn almost declined. Crowds rubbed her wrong. But Spirit needed miles, and she needed proof life was larger than vigilance. At dusk, they trotted into lantern glow and fiddle tunes. Children swarmed Spirit with sugared hands. He suffered the affection graciously. Mary Wilkes pressed pie into Evelyn's palm and whispered, "You're not alone, you know." Evelyn met her eyes, surprised by the warmth there. Community can be quiet as bread, yet feed you all the same most days. Leaving late, she chose the river trail, trusting moonlight to thread them home. Halfway, Spirit's ears stabbed forward. Evelyn heard it then. Water muttering wrong, a heavy thrashing mixed with panic. She urged him toward the sound and found a wagon tilted in the ford, wheel jammed, mule tangled, a family stranded on the near bank. The current gnawed at the spokes, threatening to roll the whole mess. "Hold fast," she called. She slid from the saddle, looped a rope, and sent Spirit swimming upstream to anchor. He leaned against the river like a wall, learning to breathe in flood. Minutes stretched long as stories. Evelyn hauled, braced, shouted timing over the roar. The father shoved. The mother steadied the children. The mule, sensing permission, kicked free. With one last heave, the wheel cleared the rock. The wagon lurched onto gravel, water slapping away, defeated. Everyone shook at once from spent fear. The woman grabbed Evelyn's hands and cried. The man pressed stubborn thanks into her palm, a silver coin, tarnish polished by gratitude. Evelyn closed his fingers over it. Keep it. Spend it on rest. Spirit blew river from his nostrils, like a trumpet praising ordinary mercy under bright stars. News of the Ford rescue ran ahead of dawn and returned wearing wonder. Folks who once shrugged now tipped hats. Evelyn accepted none of it. She fixed fences, cleaned tack, and cooked beans that tasted better than pride. Spirit grazed closer than usual, as if river work had braided another rope between them. Toward evening, clouds bruised the west. A wind came knife flat, smelling of lightning. Evelyn checked the barn doors twice and uncoiled ropes. Storms blow more than rain. They loosen pasts and courage in equal measure. She banked the fire and waited for the sky to speak tonight. Lightning stitched white scars across the prairie, unraveling distance. Hail rattled like thrown bones, then turned to hard rain. A panic ball cut through the clatter. The neighbors' yearlings had busted fence and crowded into the draw. Floodwater would turn it into a trap. Evelyn swung onto Spirit bareback and pounded toward the noise. Together they pushed the cattle uphill, Spirit bracing like a bulldozer with a heartbeat. Twice he slipped, twice he recovered, and Evelyn's hands stayed soft because trust is stronger than muscle. When the worst passed, 15 calves stood shivering but alive beneath lightning's fading glamour of relief. Morning smelled scrubbed and forgiving. The neighbor rode over with blankets and thanks heavy enough to bend a man's back. Evelyn waved it away. "Pay it forward." Spirit nickered, eyelids drooping while children braided wet flowers in his mane. For an hour, the ranch felt like a church that remembered laughter. Then footprints appeared where footprints shouldn't, fresh, pointed, heading for the barn. Evelyn followed them to the back door, to the latch she hadn't left ajar. Inside, flour hung like fog. Someone had searched her stores. Rage arrived, clear and cool. She set 3 traps and waited for returning arrogance. They came near dusk, 3 men moving like they owned twilight. Evelyn let them step into the yard's geometry wire here, stones there, lantern crooked to draw focus. "Evening," she said, voice flat as tableland. The leader grinned without friendship. "McCrae wants the horse. Easiest way is voluntary." Evelyn shook her head once. "Hard way then," he said, raising a pistol. Spirits surged between, ears pinned, teeth bared. The sudden fury startled them. Evelyn shot first. The leader's gun clattered. The others fled, tripping over consequences. Dust settled with a verdict. Spirit stood blowing, enormous with remembered wildness and protective love. Word spread faster than wagons. Some said McCrae would burn her out by week's end. Others said he'd already left the territory, trailing shame. Evelyn ignored both choirs. She rebuilt the latch, paid the doctor for stitching, and brewed coffee for anyone riding fence with her. At sunset, she led Spirit to the ridge above the ford. The river glimmered pewter, remembering last night's thunder. Evelyn breathed deep. She didn't own much. A horse, a shack, a stitched-together faith. But she owned her ground, and that mattered. Spirit touched her shoulder, then looked east, as if blessing tomorrow for them. Months later, when stories found new listeners, folks said Evelyn Harper changed because a foal refused to quit. She said the truth was simpler. The foal taught her what to keep. She kept patience, kept courage, kept a circle of neighbors who arrived when flames or floods demanded muscle. Spirit kept her honest about fear and tenderness, about standing and yielding. And on quiet nights, porch creaking, coffee cooling, she'd watch him graze and feel the country breathe through them both. The West stayed hard, but it finally felt like home. Together they had made it so, for good measure.